And one of the other things that I would say is, I mean, customer and your end user, they are queen at the end of the day, right? So you have to design, product teams need to keep this in mind, that the data belongs to the user. It's the user who's going to consent to you collecting information, user who's going to consent to you in, you having to share information. And it's in the end, the user who's going to come back and say, hey, I want you to delete my information. So when you're, in positions when you're building SaaS products, especially that have that a lot of privacy implications because of the nature of the business you're in, you have to not only implement some of these, right, compliance practices. You got to like meet GDPR, you got to meet CCPA. Some of these are absolutely essential. But it's also critical for, for product teams to communicate that to your end user, to your customer, and say, here's where I am, this is my, be transparent about it and say how you're going about the process. Because at the end of the day, you need to win, product teams need to win over the trust and the loyalty of your customers, of your end user. And that, I think, is what's really going to differentiate between a very ordinary product and something that's successful and more longer standing in some ways.
Right, yeah. So we have to know what data are we capturing and where are we storing. So now, yeah, that's right. And what data has to be kept for how much time. And now companies are storing the data and applications in cloud. So Michael, what would you suggest? Like, what are the new security threats with cloud and what companies have to be aware of?
When it comes to cloud security, there are the threats evolve over time in many ways because the technology evolves over time, right? So whenever there's new technology introduced that is powering the cloud, right? That's of course going to introduce new threats or new avenues of attack surface, right? Often when we see issues with cloud and with cloud security, there are adversaries taking advantage of mistakes, right? So human error is certainly one of the threat vectors or one of the commonly targeted scenarios in cloud, whether that's the user, whether that's the administrator, whether that's the design, the configuration, the hygiene, and so on. Additionally, right, we've talked a bit about attack surface. That matters to cloud too. Cloud has an attack surface. The notion of like a world without perimeters, or yes, there's still borders, or whatever. I mean, that's sort of really immaterial, right? And that's sort of I think looking at things through an incorrect lens. The fact is there are many attack surfaces. Your front end is one. It doesn't matter if it's a cloud front end or a front end that's inside your own environment or whatever, right? Your user is another. The endpoint is a third. Your technology stack is going to be a fourth, right? Kind of your back end. So all of those come into effect, and they evolve over time as your business evolves over time, not mattering whether you're a user of cloud or a builder of cloud, right? You're going to be using different technologies. You're going to be adopting different technologies. You're going to have more or less experienced people, kind of behind the scenes doing things on behalf of your business. New attacks are going to come to the surface, and some of them are going to target, different things, right, that are part of the whole ecosystem. It's really important to have an end-to-end view rather than a cloud-centric view, because the data flow and the access, it extends beyond simply the cloud.
That's right. Yeah, and with the landscape is changing with the new technologies and also cloud in the mix. So Janet, this question is for you. How has your role changed as an auditor and ISSO with these technologies and new attacks coming in the mix?
Yes, that's a great question, Neha. So as the IT auditor, I have to constantly keep up with the latest news, not just on my own company, but the DoD requirements. And for those of you who are not familiar, NISD is a big one, National Institute of Standard Technology. And the special publication 800-53 is all the security controls So anytime NISD changes that or add addition to it, we have to comply with that. And my auditing role, I have to make sure all of our computer systems is in compliance with what is stated on the security controls. And then we also have our system security plan, what's stated there. We have to make sure that is compliant with the NISD. And on the ISO role, the Information System Security Officer role, which is basically the cybersecurity analyst role, I have to make sure that my team is also aware of all the changes. And there's a lot of documentation to read, I have to tell you. And some of them are dry, but it's still, you need to read it. And you have to educate your employees as well, especially my IT team. And it's not just me, I need the whole entire team to have a successful audit. It takes a teamwork, it's not just me alone. And I have to constantly reminding them, has the system been patched? How's our patching cycle going? And I have to constantly have one-on-one meetings with my team members to also know exactly what they're doing, to make sure to guide them in the right path, in the right direction. And computer compliance, I think it's going to be a big thing continuously with the technology changing. I can see compliance perhaps coming out for phones now, all the mobile devices that are using, and for the companies that are using bring your own device. I won't be surprised if there's policy that come out in terms of compliance in that area as well. But it's really crucial to make sure you have the mindset of how secure your system is and how are you doing to make sure that your team members are doing their job. So in the auditing role, in a way, what Donnie was saying is due diligence. I have to make sure my team are doing what they're supposed to do. And for my team members, they're considered due care. They're taking action on some of the policy procedures on what needs to be done on the computer systems. So kind of a day-to-day role that I have. Another part of my role is also the IT disaster recovery, to make sure what are the latest changes on the risk that we might have to discuss, especially right now with the COVID-19. Most likely, I think every company have to take a look at their IT disaster recovery plan because everybody's remote now. What is your disaster recovery now, given the pandemic right now? So those are some of the things I'm also looking at. Risk management, what are some of the future anticipation of what COVID-19 might bring to our business? So things like that. And it's ongoing and it's a lifelong learning journey too, constantly reading with the cybersecurity industry, aerospace defense, the government, what they're doing. So it's an ongoing thing. And again, I said we need more people in this space. So I encourage all of you, check out cybersecurity if you're not familiar.
Sure, that's right. And the point which you said is that NISD documentation, it's so difficult to read. I mean,
yes.
People can go to sleep trying to flip through the pages. Yeah,
yes.
So we have actually, that's a great discussion and I'm thoroughly enjoying and learning a lot. We have many more participants who have joined. So first, I will request you to please put your LinkedIn profile URL in the chat. So those who have joined in last 10 minutes, please put your LinkedIn profile URL in the chat. And also that, after that, please enter your questions. Please put your questions in the chat. We'll take your questions. So now, we've kind of understood, yes, it is important. Everyone has to know about cybersecurity. So now the thing is, okay, now I know, okay, I'm not a cybersecurity professional, but I have to know. Maybe I'm a project manager, product manager, project director. I can have any other role. So what I want to know is, what should I know? And then how do I acquire that knowledge? Because I don't think I'll be able to go through that NISD frameworks and other documents. Is that information available, easy to understand for me? So that's my question. And I think that's what our audience would also like to know. So Janet, would you like to take it first?
Sure. So I have to tell you, I was very overwhelmed in the very beginning when I'm trying to understand the NISD documentation. It's just ongoing. And my goal is actually to know every single one of security control by heart. I'm still getting there, but it is publicly available to anybody. If you just Google NISD, if you want to do the security control, that's SP, stands for Special Publication, SP 800-53. If you just Google that, you'll see a documentation, and there's a lot of pages in there. But if you want to just divide and conquer and get to know what security controls are out there that the government are looking at, to be knowledgeable so you can prepare yourself as well. And it's a endless journey, I have to say. And that's just only one piece. There's tons of other special publication within the NISD as well. But I would say if you're interested, take a look. And before you know it, you could be the expert too. It just takes a lot of reading and understanding, and Google what you don't understand and talk to other cybersecurity professionals. I'm happy to talk to anybody that's interested, and just keep going. Don't give up. It is dry, but you can get there. I was even asking myself, do I really want to do this? But you know, it's needed. We need more people to understand what are security controls, why do we need it? And if the government is putting out there that questions, you know, is it, am I safe? Is this system safe? Why is this control even being placed? So those are the type of questions I will also ask. But yes, it's publicly available. You can just do a Google search, and you can find a lot of information.
NISD.
Yes.
NISD.
National Institute of Standard Technology.
Michael, what do you suggest? What should people
Well,
know?
I mean, there's so much to know. You know, I think I'll try and bucket it into a few things. The first and foremost is it takes you, right? And you know, really means you the listener, right? It doesn't matter whether you're a user, you're a product manager, you're a full-time security professional, because everybody plays a role, right? There are not enough, you know, full-time experienced security practitioners for the work available, right? The jobs that are looking to be filled, and in addition, you know, a common strategy for adversaries is to target, you know, people, the users, right? Social engineering, endpoints, and so on. We're also increasing our adoption of technology, whether we know it or not, right? Sometimes where sort of very, very obviously doing something new, like I'm using a new product, and we're aware we're adopting some new technology. Other times it's less obvious, like I bought a new refrigerator and it's a smart refrigerator, and people are, you know, maybe not connecting that this means there's a, you know, there's a software layer that's part of it, and it's a connected device. You know, I think it's also important to understand, again, whether you're a user or a builder of technology, that new things often repeat well-known mistakes, right? And so if you're building, look to the past and try and avoid those mistakes. If you're adopting, realize that all of those mistakes probably haven't been avoided in whatever new and latest greatest thing you're using, and put some thought into how you can take action to overcome some of those mistakes. Realize that as a user, you know, security and privacy might be built in, but might not be the defaults. So learn, you know, what the default settings are, and what's available to you as a user, so that you can activate, you know, the various things that might not be on that are available to you. When you're building technology, right, understand that there are sort of common attack flows. There are well-known incident patterns, right? Like Verizon talks about the 9 incident patterns. The Cloud Security Alliance talks about the egregious 11. But you might not always have a security person here to sort of connect the dots in various work streams, right? I also think it's important to, especially on the builder side, to realize that you know, security and privacy can be a positive-sum game, not a zero-sum game, right? We talked a bit earlier about how there's a misunderstanding, a common misunderstanding, that there's a big trade-off, right? Security has to come with friction. Security has to come with pain. Security has to come with trade-off. Typically, that's not the case. I mean, it's not unilaterally never ever the case, but usually it doesn't have to be the case, right? But it requires expertise beyond just security to make that happen, right? I think Snegna was referring to reducing friction, right? And that's often done by UX design and UI design and things like that, right? So now we're talking about skill sets, ways of thinking, and professionals that are not just security professionals working with, you know, security professionals, product management, and you know, software development professionals, and so on. All of this needs to come together. You know, how do you get these skills? You know, there are different ways, right? Organizations like Cloud Security Alliance make information available. I talked a bit about the the 9 incident patterns. That's a freely available annual study that Verizon produces every year. If you're more focused on needing to address privacy needs within your organization, there are privacy by design principles and privacy frameworks that talk about, you know, the underlying purpose of these things, and really understanding the themes, whether it's an incident pattern or a common objective of legislation, are far more important than understanding, you know, one specific application for most jobs, right? And then, of course, if you're in the actual technology layer, then you need to understand how to do things, you know, at specific layers, you know, coding layers, working with types of infrastructure, virtualization, automation, and so on. But a lot of professionals don't require, a lot of roles don't require that specific understanding. What they need to know are the concepts.
Great, yes. So people can go with what they need to know. And the point which you said is building the configuration which is most secure when we build configurations. That's great. Snegha, what would you suggest?
Yeah, I think I really like what was mentioned there because especially, you know, coming from my background, I haven't been in the industry that long. So a lot of the times I've realized the way to do it is to ask the right questions and being able to ask those questions because what happens is you need the baseline knowledge, right? So the concepts that was mentioned, and that luckily enough, the world has become a place where people translate a lot of information for you online as well. There's your alliances that put out blog posts, they put out very consumable information, because a lot of the times if you're just starting out, you may not be able to consume the entire bucket of everything out there, and it may actually prevent you from taking baby steps. So if that's the case, then you can start to consume a lot of these blog posts that kind of tailor to your area, right? What you're building or what you're trying to do. So for example, I work in the identity and access management space. And of course, there's so much more to NIST than some of the pieces there. If that's the case, but can I start to ask the questions as it applies to my day-to-day and start to think about what those best practices are? And that will automatically tangent into a lot of the other things. The other thing that I think is really important is knowledge share. I personally like to ask a lot of questions and like to talk to a lot of people who may not be in my direct day-to-day job. We have an amazing security team at most companies, but you know, they're a small team. How much can they do? They want you to be able to take what they do and build it into your day-to-day. So I think creating like a baseline in most areas of your life of the concepts you need to know, but then asking yourself, what do I interact with on a day-to-day where I can ask these questions? So if you're evaluating a vendor, or you are the one who, you know, sets up a certain system in your environment, maybe HR system, are you asking those questions? Are you asking the vendor? Are you asking your engineers if we are starting to incorporate these things? Are we using best practices? A lot of the times, like it was mentioned, we need to at least make sure that the past mistakes are not repeated, and making sure that everybody's held to those standards and consuming the information that's available to them, even if it's not the whole thing, but as it applies to their size of the circle, then it can all come together.
Great. Now we have got getting some questions also in the chat. So before we get to the questions, my question is for Nandini. What should people know about privacy?
I currently have a very much a love-hate relationship with privacy. It's more hate, really. It's what can I say? I mean, the world after 2018 has really significantly changed, right? I mean, you are governed very seriously by GDPR and CCPA if you're here. I think you know, privacy is can make or break your SaaS product. And I'll give you the SaaS product perspective because that's really my background. And like what Michael and Sneha were saying, not every organization, not every and every team may actually have access to the expertise of like security professionals, right? So sometimes when you are in smaller teams, when you're in startup mode, it's an all hands on deck situation. Everyone needs to have a pretty decent understanding of what the basic privacy laws are and what your basic security principles are. You have to architect your systems, you know, based on some of that knowledge. So one of the things that I like to say is, first get a baseline assessment of that awareness. Like, where is the team? Where's your internal team with respect to their knowledge about security and privacy? And you can do internal campaigns, really get a sense of what's going on. That's one pretty decent indicator. But once you have the sense, then you actually need to know where you inject some of these learnings into the group. So, and there's a lot of literature out there, like what everyone in the panel has been saying. There's NIST, of course, and then for developers, there's, OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities. As developers, you want to, develop defensive coding practices. You got to work through those. So I think OWASP does a pretty decent job of keeping you live and current with the top 10 vulnerabilities, to always, look at those, make sure that you've plugged in those gaps and you're not repeating those same mistakes. Of course, the 9 incident thing that Michael was talking about, that's another really good resource for people to go after. I think, for privacy, and it really just comes down to recognizing what data you're collecting, how you're collecting, what's private, and making sure you're architecting your solutions in a way that access to that is quadrant off. As a startup, I'll tell you, you have to figure out what your priority is. You've got to know what's the most critical, most sensitive piece of information you have. And make sure you go after that and close that out first. You can't get to everything on day one, but if you can get to the most important thing on day one, then it is no longer really day one at that point. So MVPs are now not MVPs until you've followed some of these basic principles and governed by these compliance laws. So I'll stop there because there's just so much to learn. So everyone has to wear a hat, and everyone needs to be familiar with these basic principles. And I'm not a security person, but I'm forced to be in some ways, as is everyone in the product team.
Great, yeah. So identify what's most sensitive and prioritize.
Yeah, prioritize and go after the number one first.
Yeah, makes sense. Great. Yeah, so we do have a question now. This question is from Bonza. What professional certifications would you recommend for anyone seeking to ramp up on cybersecurity?
I can answer to that. So when I first started, before cybersecurity, I actually been working in the IT department over 20 years. Started out more on a technical side, got my A+ certification. So it really depends what area of cybersecurity you want to get into. There's the technical track and the management track. And I think a lot of people think that you have to be technical in order to go into cybersecurity, and it's not true. You're gonna have, there's also a non-technical track in terms of what Nadani was saying, the privacy, the policies. We need people like that to actually write great policies. But I would recommend to actually know the technology terminologies to kind of dive yourself in it. The Security Plus is a technical certification, is the beginning technical certification for cybersecurity. And as you're getting more involved with cybersecurity, if you're interested in going to the management aspect of it, there's also the CISSP, Certified Information System Security Professional, which you need at least 5 years of experience in that to obtain. And then there's also CISA, Certified Information System Management, CISM, Certified Information System Manager. So it all depending if you want to manage a system only to make sure that, from like my role auditing, I'm working with the technical folks to make sure that they're configuring the system correctly. But I'm on the side of the non-technical team as well to make sure the policy is in place and how's the risk management part. But I would say Security Plus for those that want to go into the technical track. And then if you want to do the management route, there's the CISSP and there's also the CISM. And I think, Michael, you probably have know a bit more certifications as well.
I've got a few. I guess the first thing that in my opinion, right, whether someone ever gets a certification or not, the certification frameworks provide a valuable structured approach to learning the material, right? And that is far more valuable than, any test or whether or not someone actually has a certification, right? Because being able to discuss the topics is what's going to happen in real life, right? Whether real life is a job interview, real life is a project at work. And so your knowledge of the material will come through, much more in actual practice than in any sort of, certification, exam per se. In my experience, the foundational body of knowledge for cybersecurity comes with the CISSP. You mentioned that there are, this is sort of a 5-year experience, and they have entry-level versions of that require less experience. But again, whether you take the test or don't take the test, that's a great body of knowledge to study. On the privacy side, right, privacy frameworks like, CCPA or GDPR are a great body of knowledge. The IAPP does a really good job codifying this into curriculums for people to learn, some general and some more specific for, for different regions or jurisdictions. If we're talking, software development, understanding common flaws, like, CWE information or OWASP top 10. So again, certification, no certification, the frameworks and the structures are really valuable learning tools.
Great, thank you. Our next question is, what are some of the biggest marketing and communications challenges cybersecurity companies face today? Would like to take this question?
It's interesting. I'll take one stab at it, and then hopefully others chime in as well. So interesting that the question was asked, cybersecurity companies specifically. So, I'm going to say that discussing security and or privacy is a complex topic. I think it's hard to simplify a message and to deliver it to whether it's sort of, buyers or consumers or so on, right? So that's a marketing challenge that any cybersecurity company is going to face. I think regardless of cybersecurity company or otherwise, you're also going to face the list of all the other marketing challenges, right? Getting your information to the right people, making use of limited resources, what are the right ways to deliver a message, getting enough people who can help, craft the message. It's sort of further complicated in the security space because crafting a message that is going to be credible to a security practitioner requires security knowledge, and getting it into the right places for someone, to see it requires, marketing expertise. And bringing all of this together in enough knowledge of both domains or both professions is challenging.
Yeah, I definitely agree. We do this exercise where we think about different personas, right? So that in general in marketing, that's how we do it. And I think what happens with security-based conversations is every audience is important, and then you have to evaluate who is making the decisions as well. So when you're trying to market, you have your baseline of like what you consider from your purview or based on general practices is the best practice, but then how do we translate that to different audiences? I think that's something that becomes harder in the security space, because when you are a security professional, you're maybe looking for a depth with the assumption that you have a certain baseline knowledge. But on the other hand, you may also have either an IT professional, or you may have someone who is a PM and hasn't really delved into this too much. But of course, like we've talked about before, it's important for everybody. So something that's important with marketing is, are we creating the kind of things that different audiences want to interact with, but are not straying away from the message that you're trying to convey of the importance of that security practice, or how to translate it for that specific audience's needs. So that's one of those things. And then the second thing I think is balancing best practices with customization. So as a vendor, you don't want to come across as this is it. This is, this is your baseline. This is what everybody has to do. You need to balance that with how you can actually tailor everything to your needs. So I think that makes it harder for marketing too, is how do we make something that's flexible enough, but also rigid enough to make sure that you know that we will have both best practices and the ability to tailor it to your needs. Because like we talked about user experience before, there's somebody who's looking at that thinking, oh, does this mean everybody's always going to have to do the same thing? And the security professional is thinking, well, but like, are they making sure they're following NIST guidelines, things like that? So how do we balance that? So the messaging, I think, has to be very adaptable. So setting a baseline and then having different paths based on who you're talking to helps a lot.
Great.
Yeah, and I'll add to that as well. I mean, I'll give you the privacy angle. I think when you're marketing out, the messaging has to be very clear and transparent. You have to find ways to really transparently communicate how you're protecting the privacy of the end user. So and that's where you need that creative content that really hits that particular nerve. Because at the end of the day, when you're talking SaaS products, you're looking at the end user who's really concerned about just one thing: how private, I mean, I'm giving you a lot of my information. How secure is my information, and what are you doing with it? So I think in very easy to use language, I think marketing teams can benefit by translating what you would find in these fine print and privacy policies in terms of use, to really translate that to the end user and say, hey, here are some of the best practices that we're following. We understand that the data belongs to you. You're the user. Your user information belongs to you. You are in control of it, and how, when you don't want it to, this is, you can delete it, and this is our data disposal policy. So that, I think, communicating and being very authentic about what you're really doing, I think that is winning message, I would think, when you're trying to market something very, very sensitive. So just be clear, be transparent, be authentic, and say, here's the due diligence that is being done, and here's your data, but these are your settings, and no one's really like, there's nothing in to be read between the lines in some ways.
Yeah, and just adding on a few words for what Nandini was saying, I think goes back to your stakeholders, really the communication and your relationship with them. You have to constantly letting them know what is it that you're doing to help them acknowledge that my products are safe. We have been cybersecurity certified, or example in the DoD arena, again, I was talking about the supply chain. All the vendor we work with, you must have the CIMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. And knowing that they're certified in that arena, it helps. And again, communicating to your stakeholders, this is what we've been doing, and this is what the future looks like, and that's constant relationship building.
Great. Thank you. It was, I think we have one more minute. It was a really engaging discussion. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I would encourage the participants to visit the booths. So we have Okta and Ring Central booths in the exhibit hall, and they also have raffle prizes. So make sure that before you sign out, you visit their booths. Wonderful. Any other question? We have we'll be out of this breakout room in 1 minute, but everyone is unmuted. So feel free to ask any question, or if you would like me to unmute you, I can do that.
Don't everybody ask at once.
Wow, great. So how about now, quick closing thoughts? Nandini, you'd like to go first?
Yeah, cybersecurity should be the foremost. It's just one of those new skills that everyone in this space really needs to develop and familiarize themselves with. It can be fairly daunting and boring in the initial looks of it, but it's really not that bad at the end of the day. So and you actually do feel good and secure at the end of the day, feel like you've done your due diligence. So I walk out feeling satisfied. I hope everyone does too.
This session will end in 2 minutes. Okay, great. Yes, so thank you everybody. You guys were thorough, left us speechless. Great. Yes, wonderful. Now, Janet.
Sure, yeah, I was just going to mention, for those of you who are interested in going to cybersecurity, we need you, please do. And I'm happy to talk to you privately if you like at the Network Cafe. Just ping me. But I want to encourage you all, cybersecurity is the future. So I will challenge you to Google more information about it.
Wonderful. Michael?
Yeah, sort of in wrapping things up, right? I think it's important for us all to understand that cybersecurity is essential for us as people. It's essential for businesses. It's also essential for society, right? The world is becoming increasingly connected and increasingly automated or increasingly reliant on technology. And it takes everyone in our respective, roles and our respective, positions in life, whether it's user, builder, advocate, buyer, et cetera, to make the difference. In many cases, it doesn't require, quote, security skills. We rely, in terms like cybersecurity progress, privacy progress relies on soft skills as well, whether that's, advocacy, leadership, communication, organization, strategy, product management, program management, all of these things play a role. So it's very likely that whatever you're doing now and whatever you intend to be doing in the future, you can impact, society in some respect by influencing or delivering, outcomes with regard to cybersecurity and privacy.
Great. Sneha? Last.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate being here, and I hope everybody finds and realizes how cybersecurity affects their interaction with anything they touch. And also just ask questions to the tools you use, ask questions to the things you buy, and ask questions of the people you work with. And I think it'll change everything.
Great, thank you. And there is a lot of time now, everyone is remote, so there is some time to acquire extra knowledge. So, NISD and the resources that were recommended. So panelists, I think you entered your LinkedIn profile, but it must have gone up for the people who just joined. So if you could enter your LinkedIn profile again in the URL, and then I'll save this chat. Okay, now you'll wait. So once all the profiles are there, I'll save the chat.
I have one question.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, there's a question, yes.
No, just, so I see that this session was recorded. Is there a way that we can access this recording after the session?
Yes, you'll be able to access this. Recording will be available for 30 days.
Okay, and do you know exactly where we'll be able to find it?
This, the same environment, vFairs, that will be live for 30 days. So you'll be able to access it. But feel free to reach out to me. I'm Niharika, and niharika@witty.com.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
For having us.
See when I logged in, when I launched
We're good? Neha? You're muted, I think.
Neha, you're muted. Neha, unmute yourself.
We're back. Yeah. Yes.
I hope the session went well.
Yeah, very well.
Yes.
Me too.
Our hiccups at the beginning. Thank you. Sorry for the issues.
No worries. It was good. It was thank you for having me, Niharika.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for
having
inviting
this
me to
session.
participate. It was great.
It was
Thank you.
nice meeting everyone.
Yes.
You as well. All right. Take care.
Awesome.
Bye, everybody.
Thank everybody for participating, and we're here if you need anything.
All right. Thank you.
Sounds
All
good.
right.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.